Akil Parker is the founder and CEO of All This Math, LLC, an educational company dedicated to improving math education in the Black community. Through tutoring, consulting, and a free YouTube channel, he offers simplified math skills with a focus on Black history. He also leads workshops to help parents support their children with new math. Parker is a math professor at Cheyney University and has 19 years of high school teaching experience in Philadelphia. He authored How to Use All This Math, Volume 1 in 2023, helping parents develop math skills with everyday activities. Raised in Baltimore, Maryland, Parker holds a finance degree from Morgan State University and is a father of 3. He believes math is a tool for liberation. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cold Press Conversations. I'm Dr. Jewel, and I have Akil Parker, who is All This Math. I am excited to have him here today. Akil, tell me a little bit about who you are and why you love the numbers.
I'm a brother that teaches math, and I have a goal of teaching mathematics to the entire Black community. And I've been a math teacher for about 20 years now. Actually, this month marks the 20-year anniversary of when I first became not a full-time, but a long-term substitute teacher in a charter school in North Philly. It was March of 2005. I was teaching 10th grade geometry. So it's been 20 years since I've been, in and out of classrooms and charter schools and traditional public schools and Saturday programs and after school programs and summer programs, and all along just learning how to teach math. I was generally a good student in math in my K through 12 experience, but I also learned that when I had to learn the Common Core math, or as people call the new math, I also learned that I had some deficiencies in terms of my understanding, because I was taught math very much in terms of algorithms, memorizing formulas and just, solving, equations using formulas and whatnot. And I really didn't have a good conceptual understanding. So when I had to teach Common Core math to my education major students at Cheyney University, which I started teaching there in 2019, I had to learn the Common Core math. And it just really was very eye-opening to me, very fulfilling. That's when I kind of started to love the numbers. Before that, I didn't really love it. It was, it was cool, but I didn't really love it, until I really started to understand it on a conceptual level. Now I look for math in everything. Anytime I walk into a room, I look for potential math problems and, potential math scenarios, and just really opportunities for us to practice math. Because, a lot of the work that I do with my company, All This Math, is trying to help other people, especially people that claim to not be math people. I try to debunk that as much as possible, because all you need to be is a person and to do math sometimes, and that makes you a math person. In terms of my definition. But I try to expose to people how math is very relevant, and math is like all around you, and we should embrace it. We should run toward it. So yeah. So I'm also a father of 3, and my children motivate a lot of the work that I've done over the years, and in terms of trying to create a better society, for our people.
I like that. When one of the key things we focused on in our building when I was a principal was mathematics, and so many teachers, and I also do have a stepmother who did get her doctorate in mathematics. And so her love of math is very fun. It's a lot of fun. But one thing that we always emphasize is that if you pump your gas, you know math, especially if they're going to give you 3 cents off. If you go to the store and you love to shop and they ask for you and say, hey, I'm going to give you 20% off, you are calculating automatically. If you are going to a restaurant and you provide a tip and you provide a 20% tip or a 25% tip, you know exactly what you're doing. So you do know the math. It's about how you function with the math. How do you navigate math?
Right.
And so I had to make it and break it down for the teachers and say, you're using it. The difference is that when you go to math, this is one thing I love about it, and that's the reason why I'm so glad I have you, Akil, is that when I first started teaching, I had this dean of students, and her name was Miss Nicholson. And Miss Peggy Nicholson, I don't know if she'll ever know this or not, but she was a proponent on reading. And
Hmm.
she stated that the best way for students to understand reading is to teach it through other resources. So we had to teach math through reading, we had to teach science through reading. And
Hmm.
so I was like, how are we going to do this? And she found these books that were amazing. They were actual paragraphs and they were mathematical problems. And we were teaching the students how to read and do math at the same time.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds like my part of my Histomatics teaching framework that I've been working on. Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to tell you more about that.
Come on.
So Histomatics is kind of something that I've been organically doing for the past 20 years, and then I decided to formalize it back in 2019 and really write it down and kind of put it together as like and package it. So it's basically using Black history to teach math and using math to teach Black history. And then this past summer, I had the opportunity to teach a program in Baltimore in person with middle school students and high school students where I chose books that I'm pretty confident that a lot of their schools will not expose them to, but I think that they should be exposed to, like books such as, Asada by Asada Shakur, The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, and Narrative of Frederick Douglass, his first out of 3 autobiographies, Black Power by Kwame Ture, and Autobiography of Malcolm X. And basically I was using those books as a source for math word problems. So while we were reading those books and engaging those texts and learning the history of the times depicted within those texts, I'm also creating like percentage calculation problems or ratio problems and proportion problems, and we're dealing with decimals and rounding. We're doing statistics questions and we're finding the mean, median, and mode of different information from the books though, or we're finding distance, like when they're talking when Douglas is talking about traveling from the eastern shore of Maryland to Baltimore City to go live with another family, or be enslaved in another place. We're talking about like the distance and then calculating like the amount of time it would take, today if you were in a car driving this distance, using the distance rate time formula. So just doing things like that. Learning the history, learning the Black history, learning the mathematics, and also developing the literacy skills, English language literacy skills, all at the same time. Trying to take full advantage of all those resources and all those opportunities, to learn as much as possible all at once.
I like that you're doing what you're doing with the books that are out there, the Black history books. And when you do that, you're promoting social wellness for people to understand the history, but also gaining intellectual wellness at the same time. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted you on here talking about all this math,
Hmm.
because you are infusing both for the community, for our students, for the parents. I just read something that you stated that you're also helping the parents with this so-called new math. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to break something down. Sorry about this. I'm not a mathematician. However, I had to teach it sometimes in the classroom. They put me in as a sub to do algebra. Kids pass. But anyway, listen, one thing that I realized, especially through some of the additional training we had to do as principals, was we used to do, like you said, the rote memory,
Right.
understanding the formulas. But now we need to know the why behind it. How did you get there?
Yeah.
And what's the reasoning behind it? And having the understanding that all math turns back into addition and subtraction.
Hmm.
Um, so, can you go ahead and just go even more into what uh, you do for our parents to help them understand? Because do you take it from the social level with them?
I do. What I try to do is help them develop a comfort around mathematics, because there's a lot of discomfort. Sometimes there's a lot of unresolved educational trauma or academic trauma from when they were children themselves, when they were in those elementary school classrooms and middle school classrooms, and maybe they didn't feel as smart as their classmates, or maybe they had a teacher that didn't have effective instructional strategies, and
Back
maybe
it
the
up,
teacher
back it
wasn't
up,
as
back it up, back it up. Mm, you just named something.
ineffective
Repeat that
instructional
one
strategies.
more time. I'm sorry. You have to understand. Even though I did not major in math, I studied a lot. You've got to state that one more time.
Many parents out here that may have been exposed to math teachers that had ineffective instructional strategies.
That's powerful.
Hmm. what often happens is like as a student, you internalize it and you take full responsibility. You start to feel like you're dumb, and the teacher might have been doing the best that they could with the resources that they had. But that may have still not been enough to be able to make the topic or the process make sense for you. Right.
Can I
And a
back
lot of
something up?
people,
I want to hear more about what you're going to talk about the parent.
yeah.
My question then for you then is, I guess you can see this is a really passionate project for me. So one of the questions that I do have is, do you feel that most teachers are well prepared to teach math to students?
So to that question, I would say that based on my experience, with working with different colleagues and different math departments I've worked in, and also even myself, the teacher that I was, 20 years ago in 2005 when I started, or even 5 years in 2010, I'm very different now than I was before because you just learn, you just learn about learning styles, you learn more about math, you develop more content mastery, and you develop in like I said earlier, you develop a if you develop a conceptual understanding of math, even if you've been taught out math algorithmically and mainly through formulas, then that's also very beneficial too. So I definitely think that also in addition to the fact that I've had experience working with education majors that have aspirations of becoming classroom teachers, and I see as sophomores and juniors in college what they bring to the table, and when they come into my math methods courses, and I'm like, okay, we can't even really just focus on pedagogy because we have to focus on content because a lot of you may have this fear and this anxiety around mathematics generally, but yet you want to teach and you want to, because you want to, do positive work in your community. You like working with youth. You see the value in that, but you're going to be responsible for teaching somebody mathematics, and a lot of those students also is another thing. They kind of rationalize that, well, if I only teach kindergarten or only teach first grade, then I don't really need to have a strong grasp of mathematics. And
Negative.
what I tell
Negative.
them is, yeah, what I tell them is like, no, you definitely do, because what you're even though you may not be teaching them your 5-year-old kindergarten is calculus, per se, you are trying to lay a solid foundation so that they
Excellent.
will be one day able to sit in a calculus class and understand and perform. So you have to have some understanding because that's gonna inform how you teach counting, how you teach numbers, you know. And I think there's a lot of things in the curriculum that may actually holds children back. Where we say, well, no, they're young, they don't need to be exposed to this yet. Well, it's like a lot of that is just like a projection of the deficiencies of the adults that are in the classroom. Because if you know higher level math, maybe you realize like, oh, you know what, I could actually show this to them, even though these are third graders. This is not on the curriculum in this school district, recommended until 8th grade.
Mhm.
But I know this content very well and I know my students. So I can introduce this topic to them, even though they're third graders, right? Because when you think about it, like what is the definition of third grade math? What's the definition of 8th grade math? These are very arbitrary concepts, right? And it really depends on who you ask. So I definitely think that a lot of times, like it's the teachers. This is a contributing factor, not the only factor, of course, but
Mhm.
um, a lot of teachers are ill prepared
Yeah,
for the
and it's
responsibility.
sad, and we're not saying teachers can't get prepared, and I think that's where professional development comes in. That's where
Right.
we as teachers have to go back to school anyway to maintain our certification and our licensure. That's where that comes in, and I think that's one of the key concepts of building our education program. And with you going in and helping parents with this process as well, that allows them to be more comfortable with their student, with their child or children, so they can help them get where they have to go as well. When parents finally get it, I love seeing that light bulb come up. When parents finally get that math, that they actually have math, or at least the concept, what is it that they feel that you see?
They feel like a sense of like overwhelming accomplishment, and they feel like I think it's like bittersweet because in the moment they appreciate understanding it now,
Uh-huh.
but then they're thinking, why couldn't somebody have just taught me this 30 years ago?
Oh,
Or why couldn't somebody just broke it down and showed it to me this way? When I was in 6th grade,
yeah.
like because then I think some of them the wheels start turning. They're like, well, if it's this easy, why didn't you just show it this way? I
Yeah.
could have been through this, and maybe what would my the trajectory of my life had been had I
Mhm.
not developed this discomfort with mathematics as a subject overall. So I think it's like bittersweet sometimes.
Hmm.
But I hope that the parents is they focus on like the positive and just say well now like you can help your child, because I want for parents to be able to feel comfortable helping their children with math homework, and also for the children reciprocally I want the children to feel comfortable knowing what, even if I'm in this classroom and I don't understand what this teacher is saying, I don't understand this concept yet, I know that I can go home and I can ask my mom. I know that I can go home and I can ask my dad, my grandma, my granddad, my uncle, my favorite auntie, whoever. I can ask somebody in my family, somebody that I'm comfortable with. And when you're in the house, you know, learning, it's not, there's no standardized test that you got to worry about. You just learn. I talk to people all the time. Like when you like there's geometry and hair braiding and hairstyles. So just imagine like in the arithmetic lessons and the geometry lessons, a mother might give to her daughter, or older sister might give to her little sister, just when they just sitting there relaxing, just in that bonding time when doing some braids, or like a father, when you got your son is young, and maybe you got him, y'all in the bathroom, and he's sitting there, on the toilet seat, and you giving him a shape up or whatever,
Yeah.
or something like that. Y'all are bond, y'all can be having mathematical conversations about those situations, and those are relaxed situations, things we're already doing, but just showing people that there's a math lesson embedded within this thing that you're already doing, right? There's a math lesson embedded within this. And then with what parents can also do is prepare their children for math class. Just as a lot of us as parents, we have a certain level of understanding of history, U.S. history, world history. We also understand school curriculum, right?
Sure.
A lot of these textbooks that are written in Texas by racists or whatnot. We know that there are going to be a lot of lies, right? So we have to kind of give a lesson to prepare our children for what they're going to receive. So that way we develop their filter, and they know, okay, well, when you talk about this, okay, my mom or my dad already told me this is not true, right? This is, no, that's not really what happened, right? You already know that. So I think we have to do the same thing with mathematics and kind of prepare our children, and expose them to things like unit ratio, unit rates,
Mhm.
proportions, and percentages. So when they go to class, they're kind of just like practicing
Yeah.
something that they've already been exposed to, as opposed to going in completely cold and blind.
Yeah.
And that's when you feel overwhelmed, because it's like, whoa, I never seen this before, and it's like, this looks crazy, right? But and there's so many things like that we, as people that gamble say, don't leave money on the table, right? There's so many opportunities with things that we're doing already, and it's like every time you go in the kitchen, like that could be a mathematical conversation, or when you're on your way to school in the morning, and you could be doing time lapse, word problems, like,
Oh,
okay,
go
we
ahead.
gotta we gotta be there at 8 a.m. It's 7:42. How much time we got? Just asking, and these are mental calculations that we as parents are doing anyway. So
Yes.
what if we make that a lesson, right?
Mhm.
And make it practice, because it's like it'll be a lesson like once or twice, but then it becomes practice after. And then
Yeah.
every time your child gets in the car, they're practicing that skill, they're developing, they're getting reps in, just like in sports, right? So these are the things that I want for our parents to be able to do and to feel comfortable with it.
I
So
love
these
it.
are
I
things that
love I love it. I love it. What is one thing that okay, so you do this all the time. Do you ever give yourself a minute to just sort of like take a moment to relax? I have a lot of mathematicians that I know, and they just go, 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 go. All right. But we have to know when we need to like put the brakes on because you're using both sides of your brain, especially if you're a mathematician, more so than anything, because you're trying to find a way that it can relate to the person on everyday life. But yet you're giving them the conceptual stuff that's there, but then you're giving the calculation stuff. You're giving them all the mathematical information. You are taking it from a scientific point of view. That's that left brain. So, what do you do to kind of like create your wellness to make sure that you're staying fit, mentally fit, to keep people learning?
that's an interesting question, but I think that I have a lot of, unfortunately, these days, since I'm kind of like a full-fledged entrepreneur, I have a lot of control of my time.
Oh, okay.
So I'm able to kind of navigate and maneuver in certain ways, where I feel relaxed on a consistent basis.
Got
Yeah.
you. Got you.
And even the time constraints that I do have are time constraints that I've, for the most part, created of my own volition.
Yeah.
So so that kind of, I don't feel the same type of stress that I felt when I was a full time classroom teacher. Monday through
Gotcha. I
Friday. The
understand.
building is 7:30.
It's a whole different
So
world.
it's a little different. Like,
It's a
yeah,
different world.
yeah,
It is a
because
different world.
and it's kind of like, yeah, because it's like I'm still teaching, but I'm teaching on my own terms.
Yeah.
And I'm teaching like when I sit down and I decide, okay, what type of content am I going to create for my YouTube channel,
Mhm.
and I'm really sitting there and I'm like, sometimes it kind of like dawns on me. I'm like, wow, this is kind of, it still feels wild and strange because I'm like, I'm so used to somebody giving me the curriculum and saying, okay, this is what, this is the textbook we're following. This is and I might, of course I modify it, at
Oh,
times
yeah.
for the needs of my students, but this is like the way it is now. It's like, you know what? I think Black children need to know how to do this. So you know what? I'm making videos on this, right? Because
Mhm.
I think that's important. As a matter of fact, I know that's important, right? And it's almost like I don't got to check in with nobody. I don't have to check in with a department, a content team lead, with a
Mhm.
department chairperson, a principal. And I don't got to worry about nobody coming in my room saying like, well, why are you teaching this if we told you to teach this? It's like, so there's a lot of freedom, so I think that is relaxing, you
That's
know,
good.
and
That's
you
good.
know,
I like that.
yeah, and just being able to like, again, that time freedom, being able to like, spend time with my children,
Yeah.
and whereas I might not otherwise be able to, especially like co-parenting across state lines.
Yeah.
Like my youngest son, I'm based in Philadelphia, but I spend a lot of time in Baltimore. But my youngest son lives in Baltimore full time with his
Okay.
mother,
Gotcha.
my ex-wife. So, but just being able to like have the leeway to like, middle of the week, I'm gonna be in Baltimore so I can like spend time with him, go to her house, to pick him up in the morning. She lives very close to the school. So we walk to school together. Like this morning, we walked to school together. So, that's kind of our routine when I'm in town, you
Mhm.
know. But just being able to do that, like, I wouldn't, so that really puts my mind at ease, and like, it helps me to,
Love it.
just feel
Mm.
good generally, just to be able to do that, and it's all financed by me teaching math, like teaching math to the community, you
Isn't that
know.
awesome? Isn't that awesome?
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is. Listen, before we go, I've got to have you tell me maybe if you had an affirmation or a quote that you would like to have from Akil Parker. Okay, for those who are watching, what is one thing that you would like for them to know about mathematics, whether it be a parent or a student? What is one key thing?
I would say one key thing is the actual definition of mathematics, beyond just the formulas and the plus signs and minus signs and the exponents and everything. Math is really a way to train yourself to be a problem solver and a
Mm,
critical thinker and an analytical reasoner. And I'm sure we can all agree that these are skills that we need as responsible adults and just responsible human beings. Even as children, we need these skills. So what I want people to understand, and this is something, again, I've grown a lot as an educator in the past 20 years. Early in my career, I didn't think to tell this to students, but this is what it's really about. So when you're using a quadratic formula, it's really about, you can use, there are definitely problems where you can use the quadratic formula to find a solution. But even if you don't find yourself in a situation where you're going to use the quadratic formula per se,
mhm,
specifically, the skill and the practice of using the quadratic formula is transferable for, in any situation, like, a conflict with a relative, a loved one, someone you're a significant other, we have to solve this, we have to resolve this conflict that we
love it.
have. And you got to figure out all the variables. You got to figure
Mhm.
out, all the, what the constants are. You got to, sometimes do cost benefit analysis. You say,
Right.
okay, you got to use consequential thinking. Like
I
if I
love
do
it.
this, what's the outcome going to be? What if I do that? What's the outcome going to be? Which option has the greater upside? This is all mathematical,
It
right? These are
is.
all skills that we develop from, if we take math seriously and understand it for what it is, right?
Mhm.
So that's something I would like parents to take away, is like understanding the a more deeper definition of math beyond just the formulas and the x's and y's and variables and whatnot. That it's really about developing problem solving ability. And we are human beings. We will never live in a utopia. We will have problems, and that's not
Yes,
necessarily a bad thing. Bad
yes,
thing
yes.
becomes when we can't recognize the problems and we don't know how to solve the problems, because
Mhm,
then they take on a life of their own and they expand and grow exponentially, right?
mhm.
So we want to know how to solve problems. So look at math as a way to develop problem solving ability.
Love it. Love it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure to have Mr. Akil Parker. All is math. And he is telling it like it is. Everything is math. And I just want to say thank you very much for listening to today on Call to Press Conversations. May you return for more.